Oblivion Remastered has a problem, and you notice it within the first 5 minutes. The world looks absolutely gorgeous. The lighting, the forests, the ruins, the sunsets over the Imperial City, all next gen. And then someone talks to you, and you immediately want to leave the conversation. Not because of what they're saying, but because of what their face is doing. RT, direction, and face lighting. Here's the thing about Unreal Engine 5. It does photorealistic lighting better than almost anything on the market right now. The problem is that it applies that lighting to character models built with motion capture point spacing from 2006, and realistic lighting on dated facial geometry doesn't make faces look better. It makes them look haunted. The environment's got a full generational upgrade, the character's got a fresh coat of paint, and a spotlight pointed directly at every flaw. The world looks like it belongs in 2025, the people standing in it look like they belong in a sleep paralysis dream. Some characters got hit harder than others. Jensine has become a full community meme because her eyes snap from squinty to wide open demon stare mid-conversation, which is, not ideal. The original animations had these discontinuous jumps between expressions, and the remaster never smoothed them out, it just lit them better. So now you can see every frame of the jump in stunning clarity. The faces don't match the world. The world looks like a painting. The faces look like the painting is watching you back. But if the faces are unsettling, wait until you see what the engine does to your frame rate. Unreal Engine 5 performance. So the faces look wrong. That's annoying. But you know what's worse? The game runs wrong too. And here's the thing, you can't just throw better hardware at this problem and make it go away. The issues are architectural. They're baked into how Unreal Engine 5 renders the world, and no amount of brute force fixes that. Let me explain. Nanite, UE5's virtualized geometry system, is supposed to be the future of rendering. Millions of polygons with zero LOD popping. Sounds incredible on paper. In practice, it introduces significant GPU overhead because it's constantly streaming and processing massive amounts of mesh data in real time. That cost adds up fast, especially in open world games with dense environments, the kind of game this is. But here's where it gets really ugly. Nanite struggles with overdraw, meaning the engine wastes considerable GPU time calculating geometry you never even see on screen. Occluded objects, hidden surfaces, stuff behind walls, all of it getting processed anyway. You're paying a massive performance tax on geometry that never makes it to a single pixel on your monitor. And Lumen, the global illumination system, it's beautiful when it works, but it's brutally expensive. It eats into frame budgets hard, and the trade-off between visual quality and performance is steep on every platform. The result is stuttering and hitching across all platforms, high-end PCs, current-gen consoles. Doesn't matter. The inefficiency isn't in your rig, it's in the engine. Players with top-tier hardware are getting the same stutters as everyone else because you cannot optimize your way out of a fundamentally expensive rendering pipeline. But if you think the stuttering is bad at launch, wait until you hear what happens the longer you actually play. The persistent memory leak. Here's something fun about Oblivion Remastered. The longer you play it, the worse it gets. And I don't mean that philosophically. I mean the actual frame rate degrades in real time the longer your session runs. Digital Foundry documented this back in May 2025. A fresh boot on PS5 shows substantially better performance than the exact same session just 15 minutes later. 15 minutes. That's barely enough time to finish a single quest. Traveling between areas, cycling through save states, loading different zones, all of it accelerates the degradation like you're slowly poisoning your own console by having the audacity to keep playing. But the frame rate drop isn't even the worst part. Extended sessions introduce full-on graphical corruption. At one point, the camera just starts drifting upward while you're riding a horse, like your character is slowly ascending to heaven. Which is, not ideal when you're trying to navigate to Skingrad. Here's the kicker though. The game crashes at identical reproducible points on both PlayStation and Xbox. Same save, same sequence, same crash, every single time. But if you fully quit to the desktop and reload that exact same save file, works perfectly. No crash, no corruption, nothing. The save data isn't broken. The memory management during active sessions is broken. The game is literally punishing you for not turning it off. The dark irony is that completionists, the players most invested in clearing every Oblivion gate, are the ones getting hit hardest. The more you care about this game, the more it falls apart on you, but at least a memory leak only ruins your current session. It doesn't destroy your progress permanently, unless of course we're talking about what happens to your save files. Save game corruption. So up to this point, we've been talking about a game that runs poorly, stuttering, memory leaks, frame rates that decay like radioactive material. Annoying, absolutely, but at least your progress is safe, right? At least you can close the game, reboot, and pick up where you left off. Turns out, no brod, Oblivion Remastered has a widespread save corruption problem that can render your progress completely unrecoverable. We're not talking about a minor rollback or a lost quick save. We're talking about hours of gameplay just gone. Corrupted files show up as partially completed completed saves that the game simply cannot load or recover, they're dead. You're staring at a grayed out save slot where your 40-hour character used to live, but here's where it gets genuinely cruel. The number one piece of advice you'll find on every community forum, every troubleshooting thread, every help post is this: disable all autosaves, every single one. Because the autosave system, the feature specifically designed to protect your progress, is one of the primary causes of save corruption. The safety net is the trap. Players who follow standard gaming practices and leave autosaves enabled actually encounter worse outcomes than players who manually manage every single save file themselves. Think about that for a second. The people playing the game normally, trusting the systems the developers built, are the ones getting punished the hardest. And here's the kicker: this corruption issue likely ties directly back to the memory leak we just talked about. The same engine that can't properly manage its own memory during extended play sessions also can't reliably write save data without destroying it. These aren't separate problems, they're symptoms of the same disease, but at least bad performance and lost saves are problems you can see coming. The next issue has been hiding in plain sight for almost 20 years, and they still didn't fix it: unfixed legacy AI. So far we've been talking about problems the remaster created, now let's talk about one it refused to fix. The original Oblivion shipped with something called Radiant AI, which was Bethesda's attempt at making NPCs feel alive through algorithmic decision making. And it works, sort of. The AI makes NPCs eat, sleep, wander around, and occasionally decide to commit murder. You know, normal Tuesday stuff. Here's the thing: over a long playthrough, NPCs will randomly trigger crimes through Radiant AI decisions. Guards respond by killing the offending NPC, then another NPC does something stupid, then another guard responds, and slowly, your towns just start losing people. Not through quests, not through dragon attacks, through pure algorithmic stupidity. Skingrad doesn't fall to Oblivion gates, it falls to its own residents being idiots. But here's where it gets fascinating. During original development, the Radiant AI was actually way more ambitious. NPCs were supposed to have complex scheduling systems governing criminal behavior. The problem? During testing, 0 NPCs were flagged as essential, so the AI would casually eliminate quest-critical characters before players ever met them. Oh, you needed Martin to save the world. Yeah, he got stabbed by a shopkeeper at 3 a.m. Sorry about that. The developers had to lobotomize their own system. They stripped out the intelligence and slapped protective flags on anyone remotely important. Now here's the kicker. The remaster uses Unreal Engine 5 for visuals, but the underlying AI logic still runs on the bones of the original Gamebryo engine. They gave the game a facelift, but left its brain completely untouched. This was the perfect opportunity to redesign a system that's been broken for nearly 20 years. They didn't bother. Same algorithmic murder sprees. Same lobotomized AI from 2006, just rendered in higher fidelity. But if you think ignoring broken AI is bad, wait until you see what basic features they also decided weren't worth adding. Lack of quality of life features. Here's what kills me about this remaster. They went through the trouble of borrowing Skyrim's shoulder button tab UI. They brought over the hotkey system. They even added sprint. So they clearly played Skyrim at some point during development. They clearly looked at that game and said, yeah, let's grab some of that. But somehow they missed the clear dungeon markers. Skyrim, a game from 2011, figured out that when a player clears a dungeon, you should probably mark it on the map so they don't wander back in like an amnesiac with a sword. That was 14 years ago. And the Oblivion remaster, built from the ground up in a brand new engine with every opportunity to implement this, just didn't. So now you're wandering Cyrodiil with 0 indication of whether you've already looted a cave or not. You're just supposed to remember. With your brain, like some kind of cartographer from the 1400s. And then there's the quest marker system, which remains exactly as binary as it was in 2006. You either get a floating waypoint telling you exactly where to go, or you get nothing. There is no middle ground, no journal-based tracking, no contextual clue system, no, hey, maybe the player wants to figure this out themselves, but also not be completely lost option. It's GPS or blindfold. Pick one. The whole thing feels like the remaster team went shopping at Skyrim's feature store, grabbed the easy stuff off the front shelf, and then walked right past the aisle, labeled things that would actually require design work. Cherry-picked modernization at its finest. But if the missing quality of life features frustrate you, wait until you see what they actively chose to change. Censorship of statues and NPCs. So we've talked about features that are missing from the remaster. Now let's talk about features that were deliberately removed. And this one's a bit of a minefield. Female armor in Oblivion Remastered has been systematically redesigned. Iron armor, amber armor, chainmail, arena pit armor, and several other sets all receive the same treatment. They're bulkier now, substantially less form revealing. The female silhouette that existed in the original 2006 designs has been covered up, toned down, and effectively erased. Meanwhile, male armor got different treatment entirely, which tells you this wasn't about making armor more realistic or functional, it was selective. And selective means intentional. But the armor changes aren't even the sharpest part of this controversy. Religious statuary got hit too. The Meridia statue, a piece of in-game religious iconography that has existed since 2006, was altered from its original appearance to something closer to the Skyrim iteration. The developers explicitly redesigned it to be safer for work. Here's the thing, that statue isn't just decoration, it's lore. It represents an established Daedric prince within the game's religious framework. Changing it doesn't just change how a statue looks, it rewrites what that religion looks like inside the world of Oblivion. That's not a visual upgrade, that's a lore revision nobody asked for. And the real kicker? There's no toggle. Zero option to switch between the original aesthetic and the remastered one. You can't choose to experience the game the way it was originally designed in 2006. The original creative vision is permanently overridden, and you have exactly no say in the matter. That's not offering players a modernized experience, that's imposing one. There's a massive difference between giving someone an option and taking one away, but if you think altering the game's art is overreach, wait until you read what they put in the license agreement. The restrictive EULA. Bethesda built an empire on modding. That's not an exaggeration, that's just history. Skyrim didn't stay relevant for over a decade because of Bethesda's patch support. It stayed relevant because modders turned it into 1,000 different games. The original Oblivion, same story. Mods kept that game alive for nearly 20 years. So when Bethesda officially announced on April 22nd, 2025 that mods are not supported for Oblivion Remastered, the community had a collective moment of, I'm sorry, what? This is the company that practically invented the modern modding ecosystem for RPGs. And now they're telling the exact community that carried their games for decades, yeah, we don't do that anymore. Cool. Great. Add that to the list. But here's where it gets genuinely uncomfortable. The EULA doesn't just say mods aren't supported, it goes further. The licensing agreement explicitly states that players do not own their purchased copies of the game. You're buying a license, not a product, and buried in that same agreement is language noting that communications in-game will be sent through ZeniMax servers in a single-player game. An offline single-player RPG where you're picking locks in dungeons and stealing cheese wheels from NPCs is apparently routing data through corporate servers. Nobody asked for this. Nobody wanted this. And the implications are rough. Because once you establish a contractual framework where the player doesn't own the game and the publisher monitors activity through server connections, modding stops being a gray area and starts looking like a potential terms violation. Bethesda hasn't actively gone after modders, but the legal groundwork is there. The language exists. And for any serious modder considering investing hundreds of hours into a comprehensive overhaul project, that uncertainty is enough to kill motivation entirely. The modding community has pushed forward anyway, because of course they have. But the fact that they're doing it despite the EULA, rather than because of official support, is a pretty stark reversal from every other Elder Scrolls title. And if you think the licensing language is bad, wait until you hear what else got bundled into this single-player experience. Single-player anti-cheat. Let me just say that out loud one more time so it sinks in. Anti-cheat in a single-player game. A single-player game that literally ships with a built-in cheat console. You can open the command prompt and type in whatever you want. God mode, infinite gold, spawn 400 wheels of cheese in the Imperial City. That's a feature. It's right there in the game. But the EULA references anti-cheat provisions anyway. Here's the thing. Oblivion Remastered doesn't actually contain anti-cheat software. There's no kernel-level driver running in the background, no monitoring system scanning your files, zero anti-cheat infrastructure exists in the game. So why is everyone upset? Because Bethesda uses the exact same EULA across every single title they publish. Starfield, Fallout 76, Oblivion Remastered, same document, same language. The terms referencing anti-cheat and anti-tampering protections were written for multiplayer games where those systems make sense, and then copy-pasted onto a game where you fight mud crabs alone in your living room. And look, you could argue this is harmless. Corporate legal boilerplate, nobody actually reads these things, move along, but the damage isn't technical, it's psychological. Picture this, you're a modder. You spent 15 years building mods for Elder Scrolls games. You're looking at Oblivion Remastered, thinking about investing hundreds of hours into a total conversion project. Then you read the EULA and find language about anti-cheat provisions, anti-tampering clauses, and communications being routed through ZeniMax servers. You don't know if your mod violates these terms. Bethesda hasn't clarified, nobody has clarified, so you just don't make the mod, you move on to something safer. That's the real cost. It doesn't matter that there's no actual anti-cheat running. The contractual ambiguity alone is enough to freeze out the exact community that kept the original Oblivion alive for nearly 2 decades. Modders aren't going to gamble years of work on a legal gray zone when they could build for games with explicitly permissive modding policies instead. It's corporate legal laziness creating real consequences for real people, and Bethesda apparently could not be bothered to write a separate paragraph for a game that has a cheat console built into it. But if the EULA and anti-cheat confusion weren't bad enough, wait until until you hear what happened after the patches stopped coming. The Abandonware status. 9 million players in 3 months. Best-selling game in the United States during its launch month. More copies sold in its first week than the original Oblivion moved in its first 15 months in the country. By every commercial metric that exists, Oblivion Remastered was a massive success. Bethesda's response to all of this was to release 2 patches and then vanish off the face of the earth. Update 1.1 dropped in June 2025. Update 1.2 followed in July 2025. And then nothing. No patches, no blog posts, no tweets, no acknowledgement that the game even exists anymore. As of right now, nearly 10 months have passed since anyone at Bethesda or Virtuo said a single word about whether Oblivion Remastered will ever receive another update, which is, not ideal. Here's why this is the worst entry on this entire list. Every single problem I've talked about in this video, the memory leak, the save corruption, the performance degradation, the facial animations, the legacy AI issues, all of it was theoretically fixable. Frustrating? Sure. Embarrassing? Absolutely. But fixable. Patches exist, updates happen, games get better over time. That's how this is supposed to work. But the silence changes everything, because now none of those problems are launch issues. They're permanent features. The memory leak that Digital Foundry documented in May 2025, still there. The save corruption that players reported during the first week, still there. The faces that look like they're buffering between human emotions, still there. Every bug, every missing feature, every controversial design choice from this entire video is now baked into the game's DNA, forever. And the thing that makes this genuinely inexcusable is that this isn't a resource problem. 9 million players generated enormous revenue. This game printed money. Bethesda didn't abandon Oblivion Remastered because they couldn't afford to fix it. They abandoned it because they chose not to. That's not a budget decision. That's a statement. So every issue we've covered today, from the stuttering to the censorship to the modding restrictions, none of it is getting patched. None of it is getting addressed. The game you bought in April 2025 is the game you're stuck with. Bethesda took the money, shipped 2 patches, and moved on. And that right there is the single worst element of Oblivion Remastered, because it's the one that guarantees every other problem on this list will never be fixed. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.